This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company coming a Monday morning. It's March 11th after the Wolves 120-109 loss in LA to the Lakers on Sunday night. Chris Hine, you were there. You're now outside with a couple chirping birds.
That's right. We have some lovely friends joining us this morning here on my friend's porch. So yeah,
in sunny LA.
Sunny LA. Listen, if we're gonna do an outdoor podcast, where else do you want to do it besides lovely Los Angeles? So,
exactly.
We
You were there at Crypto last night. You saw the Wolves play not only without Karl Anthony Towns, without Rudy Gobert, and without Kyle Anderson. I think the place to start sort of talking about like game specifics is Naz. But I'm just kind of curious. I wasn't there. Like, what was sort of just the vibe and the lead up to the game once you found out that Gobert wasn't playing, Anderson wasn't playing, and you knew this was going to kind of be a cobble it together sort of night?
I think it's always different when you see guys hit the injury report with hamstrings. I think that's one thing you learn in the course of being on an NBA beat or a sports beat in general. We've seen like Rudy pops up on the injury report, like ankle soreness from time to time or knee soreness, whatever it is. Hamstring soreness is always a little differently handled. And it tends to cost guys at least a couple games when you see that pop up, because it's just you just don't want it to get any worse and keep guys out for potentially longer. So when we get the mid-afternoon injury report update, Rudy's got hamstring soreness. In my mind, I'm thinking probably not going to go tonight. So I saw him warming up. He was going through like a pregame routine, and then the inactive list and starters come out. He's not on it. Kyle's not on it either. So, I think at that point, you're just in your mind 45 minutes, half hour before tip-off thinking, this is just going to be a game unlike any other that they have played all season, and they're going to have to win it in a totally different way than they normally play. That's not to say they can't. They gave it 3 really good quarters last night. We're right there. But I think it's just defensively, it just wasn't there all night. Mike Conley afterwards, was saying, he's like, just in terms of where guys need to be and Rudy kind of directing traffic and where he usually is versus where guys are used to going. It just all was kind of jumbled last night. Guys were hesitant, a little slow, and that results in a night like last night.
Do you get any sort of indication on whether or not Rudy or Kyle will be back on Tuesday?
No. Yeah, there's Finch said Rudy. He had no indication on Rudy after the game last night. So, and again, I think that with a hamstring, you don't know. Like Monte Morris now has missed the last 2 games because of hamstring soreness. It's just kind of a day-to-day thing where it's like, how is it today? Can you go? Yes, no. You just kind of check in. I mean, but he was, if you could take this for what it's worth, like him and Kyle were, going through workouts like they were, they weren't like, they didn't come to the locker room in like their, quote unquote street clothes and like didn't do anything. You know what I mean?
They warmed up at least.
Like they warmed up. They were going through workouts, and so if you want to take that for a little something, they both at least were putting in some work pregame.
Okay, so we'll put a pin on that and we'll see. I mean, it seemed like it at least has the possibility, given sort of the context of how many games they've been playing to, that at least part of the factor would be just rest oriented, even if there is an injury there too. But we'll see. There'll be another injury update that will come out here. What it was though last night was no Cat, was no Anderson, was no Gobert, and that probably made us know that Naz Reid was going to be a key theme of this. But I thought Naz basically tied to every big theme in this entire game. Positives first. He was awesome in the first half, right? He had 21 points, 7 of 10 shooting, 5 of 7 from 3 assists. He was decisive, and like the Lakers, how they were matching up with him, they didn't really have any answers for him in the first half at all. But in the first half on the defensive side of the ball, as you said, the Wolves had no answers for the Lakers attack either. I mean, 2 years ago, Naz was playing the 5 and they played that aggressive coverage style. And, he was decent at it, right? But it's just a style of defense that they don't play hardly ever anymore. And when they do, it's often with Naz not at the 5. So there was just, I remember like the very first possession of the game that the Lakers ran a pick and roll. It was like Naz came up so far, and then Davis dives down, and then Naz, remember that? Then Naz is scrambling back to him,
scrambling back all
and
like 30 feet, and
and then it ended up being a Hachimura, like Naz then tries to get out to Hachimura in the corner and hits it
wide
open. It was just. I like paused it and went back and looked at it, and it wasn't just the coverage. I was like, man, there's just more cracks in this defense. Not even like schematic, but size. Part of the Wolves' defense this season, when you just watch them in the half court, is they take up so much space, right, defensively. And when you go smaller, when your center is Naz Reid versus Rudy Gobert, and all the trickle down of that, there was just more holes in it, and they didn't have a coverage. It felt like in the first half, or really in the second half, they tried different things, but they just had, like you said, no defensive answers. I think given the personnel and given rustiness with that style of play. All that said, though, like Naz's offense in the first half, right, versus their lacking defense kind of balanced out. It's like 69-68 at halftime. It felt like, maybe this is a game that the Wolves offense can score with them. Can we go to some zone or something to just slog it up, right? And make it work. They tried different things defensively in the second half, but the real thing that changed the game, I thought, was the Lakers' defensive adjustment in the second half. They did the Gobert thing. They took Davis off of Naz Reid. They parked him at the rim, theoretically guarding Jaden McDaniels, put Rui Hachimura on Naz, who's like, obviously not a better defender than Anthony Davis, but a big enough of a body that he could kind of move with Naz, and then Davis was there at the rim. And then Naz goes from, again, 21 points in the first half to, I think it was 4 points in the second half of 2 of 7 shooting. It was a chess match that it felt like the Wolves didn't have enough chess pieces on the board.
Jaden knocks down some of those shots. Do things change up a little bit after that? Like if Jaden comes out and in that, hits like 3 of 4 threes instead of going like 0 for 6 or whatever it was.
Then it works.
Then it works, right? So the Lakers took a gamble that Jaden McDaniels wasn't going to hurt them the way that Naz Reid hurt them in the first half, and they were right. It was just one of those bad shooting nights for Jaden in that sense. And then I think in the fourth quarter, I really do think fatigue played a role. I mean, look, there's Naz Reid played 42 minutes last night. Ant played 40 again. Nikhil was up towards 40. They did manage Conley to keep Conley around 30. But, the rest of the starters, you're asking Naz Reid, who only plays, 20 to 25 minutes a night typically, to now jump up to 42. Listen, they're finely conditioned athletes and things like that, but ask him to play 17 more minutes of NBA basketball than he normally plays. It's an adjustment. It's going to be an adjustment.
In the middle of the schedule too.
You're human, right? Yeah. It's going to be an adjustment. You might feel tired, and Naz admitted that he felt a little fatigued last night. But in the same breath, he also said, "He's like, this is what you ask for as an NBA player, though. You want minutes, so you gotta, when opportunities like this come around, you have to take them and embrace them." So he's not making excuses, but I think it's just natural to see in the fourth quarter they were gassed. And so that's just a product of having 4 players who are normally in the rotation out. Yeah.
And with 4 players who are normally in the rotation out, multiple needed to step up. With the Indiana and the Cleveland game, Britt and I were talking about after the Cleveland game of like, all right, the Indiana game, right, it took this Herculean effort from Ant. And then, if they would have came out on top of the Cavs game, we would have been like, okay, Herculean Naz effort here. They didn't. They got a good first half from Naz, but they needed a second guy, and a lot of teams, and the Lakers certainly did, are trying to take Ant out of that or make it so it's just one of those two, not both of them at the same time. Whether it was the way the Lakers were matching up with them or whatever, they just needed more juice from somebody else, anybody else. And the place you would look is Jaden McDaniels, particularly the way they were matching up with him. And I think there's a lot of frustration, about with Jaden, right now, and pointing to that and his inability to punish that matchup in the second half last night. I will say, like, they don't know that that's going to happen to start the third quarter. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jaden doesn't know that, like, all of a sudden, all right, I got to kind of be the guy, or at least like option number 2 here for the second half when, he isn't normally in that spot. It reminded me so much of that first Celtics game where out of nowhere, kind of, the Celtics put Drew Holiday on Cat and they put Porzingis on Jaden, and Jaden like ignored, and Jaden was all of a sudden like, okay, seemed a little like shocked to know that I need to be the guy here. So I say that to mean if there is like some sort of extended stretch of some main guys being out in addition to Cat, or even if it's just Cat, like Jaden needs to do more, but also there needs to kind of be a plan in place of how to get him to do more, right? Like
that's true. Yeah.
He's not going to be the guy that's just going to be like, okay, here it is, I got to go, on a whim. It needs to kind of be a structure in place to get him there. And now, with a couple of days of practice, and they're going to talk about all these things. Every single team is going to put 2 on the ball on Ant all the time. They're loading up on Naz, gap help. They're doubling Naz. And like, Jaden, this is what's going to be happening here. Jordan, Mike, whatever. Like, you guys need to step up. I think glass half full, there can be some greater preparation now with some time of how and the ways in which this team is going to be defended when it's not at full strength here. And I think some of that preparation, particularly for Jaden, when you go from being almost always 4th or 5th in the pecking order offensively to now maybe second or third.
Yeah.
I think just some awareness of that in advance will help. But at the end of the day, if they don't get, more from Jaden, it is going to be the first time they win or lose a third game in a row. It is going to be, some poor offense. They need offense to step up around Naz and Ant right now. And I think Jaden, are there other places, like what other places would you think of adding offense to?
I mean, I think, Mike Conley is one, just his usage hasn't gone up. And Mike admitted that he's, quote unquote, playing through the mud right now of the season. And I think it's natural to look at how their schedule has been after the All-Star break, which is a furious sprint pretty much. 4 sets of back-to-backs. Last night was the 5th game in 7 days.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that right now they are the most injured they have been all season. I think these two things go hand in hand, right? So I think if Mike, when he kind of gets through this moment, that is happening on the schedule, I think maybe you look to him a little bit. And of course, if Rudy's back out there and they can run more, pick and rolls whenever Rudy's available again, maybe they get back to some of that. And I just think, they're not practicing today, for instance. Guys played so many minutes last night, so there is no practice out here today. Play tomorrow, but then, they have 3 days off before they play Utah, and they're going to be staying out here on the West Coast. So I think that's the time, kind of to your point, where they'll be, maybe drilling down and trying to rediscover some things before they fly to Utah this coming weekend. So I think coming up later this week is maybe the chance where they can really do that and say, okay, what are we going to look like for the next couple of weeks now with Carl out, and they'll get some practices in to be able to try and figure that all out.
I want to talk more about Mike in particular, because this wasn't an isolated, poor game, stuck in the mud game for him. But let's grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick, who is a realtor at Coldwell Banker. You can find her at thedancingrealtor.com. It's also in the show notes on YouTube or in the podcast. And if you are in the stage of your life where you are thinking about starting the process of purchasing a home, the next step you are going to have to make is getting a realtor. And we want you to consider Adriana and what she does with Coldwell Banker. And again, how you do that is going to thedancingrealtor.com to set up a free consultation with Adriana, a consultation where she can kind of walk you through your personalized steps of what it's going to take for you to buy or sell your home. And we are offering a perk. Those of you who do set up a free consultation, however big that cup is of people who set up that consultation with her, we will do a drawing for a pair of Wolves tickets to a game down the stretch. Adriana is a Wolves fan and season ticket holder. So much of the buying and or selling a home process is about figuring out even where to begin. And one place to do that is thedancingrealtor.com, or you can call or text Adriana at 715-304-9920 to book a consultation, get the ball rolling on home ownership, and score a pair of free Wolves tickets at thedancingrealtor.com. And then also just quickly, we always want to remind you about Prize Picks, prizepicks.com, the Prize Picks app. You can use the promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus. A bunch of NBA games going on tonight. You can just I think that's kind of the more fun time to look at it. When the Wolves aren't playing, you're going to be watching some NBA games. Take a look at points plus rebounds plus assists. Like Luka's number is like 53.5 or something on that. Is he going to get more or less than that? It's a fun way to be watching games. And again, you can do that at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using the promo code Dane. All right, Chris. Mike Conley. I was just looking at it before the game or before the pod here, just Conley's last, 7 games. And if you go through it, minus 24 last night in a game, they lose by 11. The game before that, minus 10 when he was on the floor in a game, they lose by 9. Plus minus of 0 the game before that in a game they won by 2. Minus 3 in a game they won by 5. Plus 8 in one game in a game they lost by 1. Minus 22 in a game they lost by 4. Minus 8 in a game they lost by 9. So that's 6 of the last 7 games. They've been worse, actually significantly worse, with Conley on the floor versus when he's on the bench. Like you said, I watched that the clip or the media afterwards. He did say he feels a little bit like he's playing in the mud right now, and it looks like that makes sense, kind of. That the 36-year-old would be the one maybe just not having anywhere near the necessary amount of juice to play with when he's, when they're going through these 5 games and 7 nights and 4 back-to-backs since the All-Star game. But man, they need Mike Conley now more than ever. It feels like he's going to unlock other offensive options, whether it's him individually or, like you said, with with Rudy and 2-man game.
Yeah, it's, he had a very candid quote last night where, he's like, I got to do this. I got to be better. It's like, just so happens I'm in the game at the wrong time. Quote, sometimes I'm the reason why they came back. I gave up some defensive plays or not making shots offensively. But then in the same breath, he's like, I know what I'm capable of. This will pass essentially. And he'll kind of get back to playing the way that he normally plays. But yeah, this is the time where they need everybody to step up. Naz is stepping up. That's something that we all thought needed to happen. And this is what Naz did last year too. He elevated his game when Carl went out and kind of really took another step. And maybe he's taking even another step this year. But yeah, just having Mike be a little more higher usage, taking a few more shots, knocking down a few more threes. Like, they need that right now. They I forget what was the stat line last night, but it didn't, like, Mike Conley's stat line didn't look any different than it does.
Yeah, 9 points, 6 assists, 3 boards, 3 of 6 from the field, 1 of 3 from three.
Mike Conley's still only taking 6 shots. Doesn't seem even in a game where they were jacking up threes left and right. It's like, you want a guy who's shooting 40% from 3-point range to be taking a lot of those threes, ideally. So I just think it's, they need a little more usage out of him. And I think ultimately he recognizes that, and it's just a matter of getting back to that level, however long that's going to take.
I think like they can use Mike to break the ways in which teams are loading up or accounting extra for Ant and Naz just by playing pick and roll, just by like throwing in a level of confusion on a Naz pop, right? Pop versus dive, and they can't completely be set to be loaded up against that. Like Naz last night, if it was one guy, it wasn't really an issue. Once it was, I got to get through this guy and then I got to get through the next guy, that's more complicated. And I think that's what more and more teams, as they're scouting the non-cat Wolves, are going to do against Naz. They're going to guard him more and more like cat. So can you find and can you use Naz's speed and decisiveness through Mike pick and roll to get the defense shifting, to get Naz in a place where he can catch, go, shoot, whatever. And then I think the same thing comes through that from Ant, right? You run a Conley Naz pick and roll. You run a Conley Gobert pick and roll if he's back, and you get it back to Ant on the swing where he can go and again attack decisively, only needing to beat one guy. Like, they need to put their best offensive players in the least adverse offensive setups as possible right now, because they're so dry in terms of the offense that they have. And I think the way to do that is with ball and body movement, and you make that start happening with like a scripted action like that. Because if teams can just sit with their back to the basket and look and see what Ant and Naz want to be doing, like, I think most teams are going to be able to take that away. And the Wolves can't be a mediocre offense right now. Like, they can't. And they need more juice in the half court. Maybe they can get some more in transition. They got to find these other low-hanging fruits. But I think a lot of it starts with Mike Conley, who probably was their third best offensive option in that game last night. It feels like a lot kind of relies on him right now.
Yeah, it does. And, I do want to see, like, if Rudy plays in that game last night, what does it look like for Mike?
He takes more than 6 shots, right?
Right. He takes more than 6 shots. So, Rudy being out, and we didn't really delve into that with him. We should have maybe asked him that, which is like, just how do you approach it offensively when Rudy isn't there?
He kind of needs Rudy to get going.
Yeah, exactly. So I maybe that's something that we can revisit, Tuesday night if Rudy doesn't play in that game as well. Just kind of what's Mike's mindset? How is he going to attack Tuesday maybe a little differently than he attacked Sunday? But yeah, I just think, look, he played through this whole stretch. Yeah. He could use the couple days off on the West Coast to get some rest and rejuvenation and all that. I really do think it is just that this moment of the season where it's just tough, and he's been very durable this year for them. But I think he just needs he needs to find that extra gear again somehow, and the schedule hasn't done him any favors.
This may be a decent time to point out that Jordan McLaughlin was pretty good, and he brings some point guard juice in a different way than Mike does. You're not gonna really just run that spread pick and roll with J-Mac and Rudy in the ways you do with Mike and Rudy. But J-Mac, he can press that pace button, right, and get the ball moving and going. And particularly now when he's making these threes, they aren't guarding him, like, they're open threes, but he made 4 of the 9 threes he took last night. He's up to 43% on the team. Looked it up this morning. That's the best 3-point percentage.
Best 3-point percentage on the team.
Wolves, it's only 58 attempts.
I looked at that the other day myself. I was wondering where Naz ranked in terms of 3-point shooting on the team. And then I was like, I forgot about Jordan McLaughlin shooting over 40%. Listen, he, that's huge. I've actually been meaning to. Once I realized that, I'm like, I should talk to him about, like, see if there's anything that he did differently. Yeah. So I hope to maybe catch up with him.
It's confidence. I mean, I would guess, right? His answer would be confidence, right? Last year at this time, he had probably gone on a stretch of terrible shooting, and then with him, that kind of it makes the defense not respect him at all, and then he kind of has to drive, right? And he could do that because he's quick, and, like, we know he can finish. We've seen that plenty, but when they know that's all he's going to be doing, it just feels like he gets nullified in that way, and then all he can do really is add to the game. But with this shot here, maybe that opens up a couple different ways that he can impact this. And I think it's important, like, even if Monte Morris plays on Tuesday, which I'm not necessarily expecting because, like you said, the hamstring. But like in theory, like I think J-Mac still plays, and I think of your 8 guys, 9 guys, 3 of them are point guards, and like Finch is clearly comfortable doing that. So, when Conley's stuck in the mud and when Morris is hurt here, and how what's he going to even look like when he's able to come back? It is nice to have a third point guard who's really like a second and a half point guard. At least he has been this season.
Yeah.
To go to that was I didn't write that down, but that's a positive in my mind that came out of this game. It's just adding point guard play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's earned again a longer look when Monte Morris does come back. I do think secretly that Monte Morris, I think they really could use him right now.
Yeah.
Like I think this is actually a significant thing that's happened these last 2 games, that he's gone out and hasn't been available.
It's probably a good point. Yeah.
I think he was really rounding into form. I think the shot was coming back for him. Like I think they really could have used him these last 2 games.
He is another one of those guys that they guard on the perimeter.
Yeah.
And that's even a difference than J-Mac. Like cool, J-Mac's making 43% of them. I think what Monte, when I looked at it last, was like 39%, which is what he always shoots, has always shot throughout his career. So they just guard him more, which like you could almost, particularly with how much they're loading up on Naz and Ant, it's almost more valuable right now to be a perimeter spacer that's guarded rather than even being a perimeter spacer that's
not guarded.
You know what I'm saying? Like even if you're not guarded, it
just opens up everything else on a possession by possession basis.
So if J-Mac goes like 2 of 9 rather than 4 of 9 last night, that's a different sort of thing. That there's some randomness to it. I think the biggest thing, and maybe J-Mac will start getting this, is more of that respect, being guarded in the corners at least. So there's more. They just need more room. They need more room for easy offense in the 2-point area. Like if every single time Ant or Naz get within 7 feet and they have to like do a Euro step backwards finish at the rim, like it's just tough right now, and having other weapons that have to be respected, which they're low on right now. And I mean, they're low on, right? Like if J-Mac, Garza played, who's the third guy off? It's all
TJ Warren.
Yeah, TJ Warren, who's he's been actually pretty solid. I feel like out of nowhere for them to like. I think they have enough. It's just enough to survive. It's just kind of about putting those in the right spots and those guys sort of confidently executing from there, I think.
Yeah, it's just the margin of error is just slimmer on a night like Sunday night as well.
Yeah.
You look up and it's the 4th quarter, and this is no disrespect to TJ Warren, but he hasn't played professional basketball all year. And in the 4th quarter, he's finding himself one-on-one matched up against LeBron James defensively. Like that's
not good.
Welcome back into the NBA, right? It's just like that's where the Wolves were at in this game, and and I think TJ Warren's done a really nice job of filling in, and he's looked the part, and I wonder if that leads to a permanent spot the rest of the way here, the way that he's performed. But just in last night's game, it's just like this is where they're at in this game, and it's just not ideally where you want to be on the defensive end. That's all.
I had somebody text me this morning, will TJ Warren be in the playoff rotation? And I was like,
it's not a crazy question to be asking right now.
I said, if Cat's out, right? Like,
that's not an off base question.
Was
that person our mutual friend, the Life Gorgeous host podcast, Mr. Craig Kilborn, by any chance?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, but he was probably asking the same thing.
Got to hang with him while I've been in LA.
Oh yeah.
Big TJ Warren fan.
Okay. Of course, yes. Of course. Yeah. I mean, I've been a fan of it too. Even just like, I think in all 3 games, he has a possession where it's like 7 seconds left on the shot clock. All right, one dribble here and do like his little quick fling 17-footer, and he made it. I mean, for the most part, he's a spacer, but he's also like a break glass in case of emergency spacer who can maybe get you something there. Like I think the skill set, makes sense. Kind of I think it's the Shake Milton role. Seems kind of weird. We maybe think of like TJ Warren as more of like a 4 or something, and Shake
Sure.
as a 1-2. But it kind of feels like that. Like he's coming in, and I bet you he's played 85% of his minutes without Ant on the floor. That's kind of like the Ant's out, TJ Warren is in. They've overlapped some, but most of it has been in that way. I actually think it's a pretty decently important role for this team right now. And even with Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert back in there, feels like TJ Warren is maybe part of the mix here. Maybe against a smaller team, you don't do it, but yeah, he's part of the story here for the rest of the season.
It's it is crazy. It's been really cool to see. It's crazy that like Justin Jackson never got any run, and TJ Warren on night 1 was playing major minutes, and it's just like, how did this happen? Like, how did this like it just happened like so quickly?
Right place, right time.
Yeah, no, seriously. Right? Like
yeah,
100%. And yeah, I think it's been just very cool. See, I haven't really gotten a chance to really talk to him yet because I wasn't in Cleveland and Indy. You guys were. Didn't really get a chance to talk to him last night, but I hope to maybe at like an upcoming practice here or something like that. But yeah, that's just a cool just human story of in the NBA. Right?
Once you're out, you're normally out. You know? Or maybe you get back in, like you said with Justin Jackson.
This is how it happens, right? You're out. You get some 10 days. You're in the G League, and does it ever click again, right?
Right.
And it seems to be clicking at the moment.
Chris, let's talk about Ant a little bit here, and just what I've been saying. I spent all this this time once we find about the cat thing, and you start looking for like replacements. Okay, Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, which lineup combinations have worked without Cat? Blah blah blah. And so much, like, we're immediately smacked in the face with the Indiana game of like, well, the best answer is Ant being awesome, just more Ant, and clearly that happened and worked against the Pacers, one of the worst defensive teams in the year or in the league. You go Cleveland and the Lakers, who are much bigger, put up a lot more resistance at the rim, and it's harder. It's harder for Ant. He's also dealing with all the fatigue factors that everyone else is, probably even more than anyone else is, as the highest usage player on the team. But he's getting frustrated. I think he's getting frustrated about as much coverage as he's receiving, and then he's also been really frustrated with the refs and the fouls here. I'll play that clip from you guys talking to him about that last night in the locker room.
So shorthanded, you came in here and said you should have won that game.
Hell yeah.
What's kind of the mentality right now when you know you are fighting with one hand behind your back?
It's tough. It's tough every night. When we don't get to the free throw line as much as the other team. When one player shoots more free throws than your entire team, it's tough. It's tough to compete in the fourth quarter when you miss a shot and they go into the free throw line every time down the floor. So it's tough, man. So I tip my hat to my teammates, my coaches. You just got to go out there and fight every night.
Yeah. How do you let that not get you guys down too much?
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard not to. I mean, for any player, like, because you want to compete, and if every time they get the ball and we so-called foul them and they get to the free throw line, it's tough that you don't. I don't know how to explain it, man. We want to compete out there and be able to play without, the foul calls. For sure.
Does that just get in your mind when you play defense, though?
It get in your mind on offense. I mean, yeah, throughout the whole game. I mean, the stuff that they tell us, the reason why it is a foul and why it's not a foul, it's crazy to us, for sure.
How do they explain those things?
I mean, it's just pretty much. I think I asked one of the refs today. I'm driving the ball and he smacks my arm. I know you heard it. Is it not a foul? He told me no, and I said, so what you calling for them? And then I just left the conversation alone. It was a great game, great refs tonight. See y'all later.
I think my favorite part of that clip was
the Gatorade.
The Gatorade. Yeah. How many times he brought the Gatorade up to drink it, and then he never took.
It's
a
like
sip.
9 Gatorade pump fakes. That you got to, if you're listening to this on
Gatorade
podcast,
pump fakes. Yeah, you
go to the
clip of
YouTube
it.
channel. Oh my god, that was
he's
so
holding
funny.
a Gatorade bottle up the entire time he's talking, threatening to take a drink, but he never does.
That was funny.
funnier than his comments. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's I again, like I'm trying to think about it in the sense of like, okay, guys, we gotta like chill out a little bit on all the ref stuff. It can't be all consuming. But then the other part of me goes, all right, like there's just frustration going on right now. Understandably, there's frustration going on. You got your three bigs are all hurt and you didn't get a play in that game. You've had the schedule and all that, and like it's human nature sometimes to project some blame. And I know that they also there's truth to that too. Like Ant is feeling like he's getting bumped, and sometimes he is too. I mean, the LeBron smack of Garza's arm, you know, in the third, fourth quarter, whatever that was, that didn't get called. I mean, I'm not saying there's not being missed calls with this team right now, but it's like, man, there's already a lot of stuff going against
I thought just overall a consistent. What do players always say? They say, I don't care if it's a loose whistle or it's a tight whistle. I just want it to be consistent. Mm-hmm. That was a consistently officiated game last night. It was loose both ways, I thought. The Wolves were not called for a ton of fouls. Yes, Anthony Davis went to the free throw line, but if you look over, 13 times, whatever it was, but if you look at total fouls called, like it was not an egregious night in terms of fouls called.
Yeah, and I mean, just off the top of my head, it was a lot of just like the Davis ones were, I mean, the second half, he just started going to the offensive glass.
Right.
Like crazy. Yeah. Wolves were tired. He saw that as an opportunity in size and spirit. And took it. I mean, like, think about Rudy, right? Rudy gets fouled all the time when he just goes to attack the glass, and it's like some 6'6" guy who comes in with a chicken
wraps him up, or
like that happens there too. I was a bit surprised, like, turned out the game last night, and a couple hours later, as I'm going to bed, like looking at Twitter, and there's all this. It was the refs again, sort of thing. And I don't like touching the ref stuff. Me and Britt went all into it, obviously, with the Foster game.
Yeah.
And I thought that game and that situation, to my bar, really justified it.
I what you're saying last night was a ref show.
Yeah, it felt like lingering frustration from that.
Right.
And maybe overall for the season. I don't think if we graded the quality of the whistle the Wolves have received this season, they're not in the top half of the league. And that sucks. And again, like we said last episode, there's ref problems going on in this league. I just think, like you said before, there's this an even smaller margin for this team, particularly on offense. Even at full strength, this team, not a good offense, did not have a big offensive margin. That margin shrinks without Cat. It shrinks down with more players being injured. And now I feel like you're shrinking it a little bit more by being consumed with the rest, not just Ant specifically, but just overall it just kind of feels like one of those times where it just needs to be moving on through it and understanding that it sucks. It sucks when you feel like you're getting fouled. We all know that, but I don't know. It can't consume. It just can't.
This is what happened last year. They started losing games with Carl out, and so they turned their focus and attention to the refs, and cried and complained all season long about that. And look, I don't know how referees think. I don't, we don't talk to referees, right? But when Rudy Gobert makes a gesture like that to Scott Foster and then says what he says after the game, and earlier in the season, Anthony Edwards is caught on a microphone in Oklahoma City saying cheating blank refs, I don't know that that's really going to endear them to the officials of the league. You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah, sure.
And if you're looking for the benefit of the doubt or something like that, like doing this publicly to the officials,
they're on their bad side.
I wonder how, as an officiating brethren, do they take it a certain way?
I mean, I would. I don't know, but my assumption would be yes, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think, whatever. I think particularly when the things that Rudy is implying are that bad, with it being that it's rigged and that there's money and those sort of things. Like I would imagine most refs, for the most part, they get complained to every single game. There's a reasonable margin for error in that of complaints they'll let go. But even prior to the Rudy suspension or the fine and getting, the technical kicked out of that game, whatever, or fouled out of that game. Like, I think this team already kind of had a label of a complaining type of team, right? Like, I don't think that was out of, I don't know. They've built up that reputation somewhat this season. And it's hard because I don't think the refs are doing a great job either. It's the most it stood out to me in any season since I've been covering the NBA. But at the same time, it's like, I remember when we were in Chicago, Rudy said something. He's like, the reffing like is what it is. I don't think it's going to change, and we need to operate accordingly. And like those words, which I'm prefacing, but you were there. Like he said something along those lines, and that mentality, that ethos, I think needs to sink in here too, because it's not going to work if it feels like this every game.
Well, they're not operating accordingly is what's happening.
Yeah.
They're trying to operate as if they could still get, the quote unquote fair, good whistles on a nightly basis. It's not happening. Get over it and move on. Yeah. Because it's one of the bones I have to pick with this team is like, get over the officiating already. Just get over it. Like in the playoffs, if they don't call stuff, it will benefit you in the long run because you will be able to defend to your heart's content.
That's a good point.
Playoffs. So, I really think they just need to get over it. They really do.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question when it comes to officiating, right? Is like controlling your emotions, but also applying pressure is important on the refs to some degree too. That's where there's.
But I think in the last couple games, it has started to affect them negatively. That's the line. Yeah, and that is where they're going back across that line in a negative way, and they need to reel it back in.
Yeah, they do. It's again, just because they already have things working against them that are outside of their control. Right. And this is another one that they, I guess they can control themselves a little bit in it and have, I don't know. Yeah. Just move forward without it derailing you, because that seems like what has been happening a lot recently. Anything else really you want to hit from this game? I wrote down that Luka Garza played. I
looked up. I think I tweeted this at one point. I said Luka Garza 7 minutes, 7 points, 3 fouls. I'm like, sometimes the world is very predictable. It's it's like that is the Luka Garza experience, and you got it in full force last night.
It was like that very first, he hit that corner 3.
Yeah, it comes in right away, hits a 3, and
then gets scored on like.
He committed I think he gave up an offensive rebound and committed a foul on like the first defensive possession or
just
something
right
like that.
Through him.
Like.
It is the experience, and it is why he hasn't ever had hasn't been in the rotation, is because there's that trade-off with him. There's the buckets versus what you're sacrificing defensively. It's funny, like I almost feel like for him, the better time to have been dropped into the rotation would have been when they had a depleted but more defensive group out there.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like last night, they didn't really need offense as much as they needed defense. Wouldn't you say? In the game?
No, agreed, 100%. Yeah,
and he had to play and should have played in that game there, but it was like, all right, we're going to try and make up for more of what we don't have, which is defense, with more offense. And I mean, it wasn't like, I mean, Naz was just as bad as he was defensively. I thought like they were lost in whatever coverage it was that they were in, and you're going up against. I mean, a lot of the times, like Naz or Luka are at the 5, and it's Anthony Davis and Jackson Hayes on the floor for their team. Just gigantic, And then it's LeBron, Torian Prince. Like, they're playing a huge, huge team last night when the Wolves are playing their smallest roster ever. And, and Garza, to that end, it makes sense that he didn't stand out in a big way. His minutes were also, super limited. I think there's a case with him that it's like maybe you give him more extended stretches, more of a piece of the offense, and he gives you more. But now you're playing. It seemed like Finch did not want wanted to play Garza as little as he needed to, right? What'd you say? It was 9 minutes.
Yeah. It was,
And Naz plays 42 or whatever. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just like making it work with him requires certain concessions. And I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world having him on the floor, but it wasn't what you would hope for in the, okay, G League MVP, Luka Garza's here, and now the Wolves have an 18 points off the bench a night guy. That isn't the role, and it's honestly not really what they needed in that game either, I thought.
Yeah, well, it's just, it's hard to have what you need when you have as many injuries as they had last night. Even if Kyle Anderson is able to go and Rudy's not, I wonder how differently that game goes defensively for them if Kyle can handle some LeBron minutes. Well,
yeah, I mean Kyle being back is because he can just guard anybody pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
Like they put him on Jared Allen in the overtime once Rudy fouled out, right? Like he can guard some centers there that or they feel more confident than with him on that guy than Naz, whatever. Like, yeah, it would be interesting to like run that game multiple times. Like, what does it look like if just Rudy is in there? What does it look like if just Kyle is in there? What does it look like if Rudy and Kyle are in there? Obviously, they played without both of them. And to that end, I thought it was an accomplishment that at halftime the game was close. Like,
and they had the lead through 3 quarters. Like they were up.
That's what it was. It was at the
that game was going in the fourth quarter a winnable game, and then the offense. I mean, the offense just needed to play at a supernova like level for 4 quarters, and it didn't for the first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. That was the game.
It was just done.
Essentially, it was just.
I think the game was done once they made the Rui onto Naz switch. And once that first, I mean, Jaden played the first 5 minutes of the third quarter, and then Finch got him early for TJ Warren because they didn't have an answer for that. They didn't have an answer for the Davis at the rim thing, I thought, and then Naz being guarded by Rui and really double teamed in that sort of way. It was like they kind of survived that, but ultimately couldn't get 24 minutes in the second half of good enough offense to play with it. And maybe one more body would have made a difference, right?
Yeah, I think it could have. I think
almost certainly would have. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But just one of those games, and we'll see. We'll see who's healthy and available on Tuesday night out here. If you can stay up late to watch it.
Yes. That is up next. Wolves Clippers. Jason and I will talk about that on Wednesday morning. I did watch the Lakers play the Bucks and the Clippers play the Bucks on Sunday morning, and the Lakers did seem like they had a lot more juice than the Clippers have right now. Like, obviously,
the Lakers are just, I think the Lakers are just a more desperate team right now. And I don't think it's a coincidence that like a LeBron James team is now trying to kick it into gear the last 20 games of the season. Like, I don't think that's a coincidence.
I don't think it's that much. Like, I don't think the spread should be like that much more if it's the Clippers than the Lakers right now. Like, I think the Wolves have just as good of a chance of beating the Clippers with this roster as is right now as they did, the Lakers. And you wouldn't think that looking at the standings maybe, but I guess I say that to mean you get 1 or 2 guys back. Like we were just saying, I think they can compete with the Clippers, and an extra body maybe makes it so you play 4 good quarters or 3.5 good quarters rather than 2.5 good quarters. Like they did last night. I do think this team, without just Cat, has enough to stay competitive here. You start stripping out a couple others. Now this is a very mediocre team in the grander landscape of the team, or of the league. But we will see. Yes, like Chris said, he'll be there. Next up is Wolves Clippers back at Crypto. You're following Chris for updates from LA, and you're reading his stories over at the Star Tribune. Chris, appreciate you making it happen.
By the way, I enjoyed
out here.
I enjoyed your tweet about how it's like, it's crazy that the Clippers are playing at noon and the Lakers are playing on the same court at 6:30. Like I've seen that with hockey before. Like
Yeah.
you see they turn over the ice to the court pretty quickly.
Yeah, you probably saw that at United Center a bunch.
Saw
when
that
they
a
were
lot
covering
at
the
United
Hawks.
Center. Yeah.
It is crazy though. I mean, you're right. I now have gathered. I understand it happened. I'm still saying it's crazy.
You're
It's
not
crazy.
wrong. Like it's like one of the things that's cool is like sometimes when you're in the press, like back when I used to cover hockey, you'd work in the press box upstairs and you'd be there like working as like
While
the
it's
arena
going.
crew is turning over the floor. And it's really just like they wheel out all these wood panels, that is the basketball floor, and they just piece it all in like a puzzle. And it takes them, I think the whole process takes them like maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours to complete.
Crazy.
Like that's all they need is about 2 hours to turn over hockey to basketball or basketball to hockey.
And
So,
the ice is below it.
Yeah, the ice is below it, and there's insulation underneath the basketball floor to keep the moisture from seeping through. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
As the floor is getting assembled over the ice.
There was one time, I think it was before you were on the beat, that like Disney on Ice was at Target Center.
Yeah, they had to postpone
Were
the
you there
game,
for that?
right? I wasn't there, but I've heard about it. Yeah.
They did not have that
that's-
layer or whatever.
Yeah.
There was water
Yeah.
coming through the. So I'm standing by. It's still pretty crazy.
Yeah,
But
it is.
They made it happen. The Wolves did not. He's Christopher Hine. You can follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Next up will be Jace on Wednesday morning after Wolves Clippers. Until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.